EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, June 6th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Alex Avina, professor of history at Arizona State University, on Mexico electing its first female president in a landslide. She's on the left. And later in the show, Dr. Dan Wilson of Debunk The Funk will be with us to combat some anti-vax misinformation. Also on the program today, Israel kills at least 30 Palestinians, mostly women and children, in a strike on a school that was acting as a shelter. CIA Chief Burns is back in Qatar trying to get Israel to agree to its own ceasefire proposal. It's odd. If it's theirs, why haven't they agreed to it yet? Meanwhile, Netanyahu turns his wartime ambitions to Hezbollah in the north. Spain applies to join South Africa's ICJ genocide case against Israel, the first European country to do so. Biden gets a small polling bump from Trump's felony convictions. Georgia's Court of Appeals halts the election subversion RICO case against Trump as Fani Willis's conduct is investigated. She really just not a case to be messing around with and putting somebody that you maybe slept with on. I mean, I'm sorry, I maintain that was a horrible idea.
Also, the cop city prosecutor, so she can
kick rocks.
Yeah.
The Congressional Progressive Caucus rescinds its endorsement of Mondaire Jones after Jones endorsed Jamal Bowman's right-wing primary opponent. Good job, Jayapal there. Yesterday, Senate Republicans blocked a bill that would have protected access to contraception. The European Central Bank preempts the Fed, cutting interest rates for the first time since 2019. In Wisconsin, a warden and other prison employees were arrested and faced charges over horrific inmate deaths. Kathy Hochul torpedoes New York City's congestion pricing plan at the 11th hour, infuriating advocates and endangering $15 billion in subway and transit improvements. And lastly, the world has hit 12 straight months of temperatures breaking heat records. This May, the hottest May in recorded history. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an EmMajority Report Thursday. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Matt. I'm here with Bradley. Later on, we'll be joined by Matt Binder and Brandon Sutton for the fun half. Let's start here because we're in the midst of VP auditions, right? And for a while, I think we'd said that J.D. Vance should be the favorite. Doug Burgum is somehow still in the mix. Matt, you can probably explain that with some dollar signs, right?
Doug Burgum is a North Dakota billionaire who got his billions selling the company to none other than Bill Gates. So Trump would probably like some of that Bill Gates money. Thank you.
Well, I am the Vax guy, right? He is the Operation Warp Speed guy, so that's some synergy there. But another person who is auditioning for VP is Florida Republican Representative Byron Donalds. And earlier this week, he was at an event in Philadelphia called Congress Cognac and Cigars. Oh, baby. And he made some outrageous comments about Jim Crow that made headlines. And here he is on with CNN's Abby Phillip, who asked him here to clarify his statement. And you'll hear his statement at the beginning of this exchange, this interview.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York, and I want to get right to it tonight. One of Donald Trump's vice presidential contenders, Congressman Byron Donalds, he made some comments that has a lot of you talking and a lot of Democrats fired up. I'm going to speak with him live in just a couple of minutes, but here are the original remarks. They were made as a part of a pitch to Black voters in Philadelphia, and I want you to hear it in its full context. Listen.
I grew up with my mom. My dad and my mom, things didn't work out. As an adult, I look at my father and I say, bro, I don't know what happened, but you my father and I love you. Wow. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. Wow. But I'm gonna tell you this, growing up, the one thing I knew I wanted to do, and this is not about my father, this is about what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a father to myself. Wow. And so one of the things that's actually happening in our culture,
this is just Cosby stuff, by the way,
politics, is the reinvigoration of Black families with younger Black men and Black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a Black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the Black family was together. That's right. During Jim Crow, more Black people were not just conservative, because Black people always have been conservative-minded, but more Black people voted conservatively. And then HEW, Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more Black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth.
Now, we should note that many Democrats who jumped on Donalds today claimed that he said that Blacks were, quote, better off. As you heard there, he didn't use those exact words in the clip, but the congressman joins me now to talk about that. Congressman, thank you for being here. I want to just focus on really the substance of what you were saying or trying to say in that clip. What did you mean by Black families were more together during Jim Crow?
Frankly, what that is about the empirical fact that before the Great Society, before Lyndon Johnson's policies, there was more Black families united. The marriage rate in Black America was significantly higher before the Great Society.
Can we pause it for a sec? All right, so I wanted, good on Abby Phillip for giving the full context, because he's claiming that it was taken out of context. I think it was quite clear what he was trying to say there. He's saying that Black families were better off before Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, which advanced civil rights for Black people in this country, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was a part of desegregating our schools. Employment discrimination was outlawed at that. The anti-democratic poll tax system that was particularly acute in the South, which took away from many Black people the right to participate in democracy. That was a part of the Great Society. The literacy tests that were a part of disenfranchising Black people. Like, that's the substance of what the Great Society was under LBJ. But notice how everything he is working backwards from is the notion of a nuclear family for Black Americans. And that is the kind of number one indicator of how better off people were during this time period, when in reality, that is not a good marker for prosperity, for equity. but it is a very conservative one,
I would
and
say,
that's the audience
like,
he's appealing to.
Why are these families torn apart? Is it because we got rid of a white supremacist legal regime, or is it because of the investment and like oppression of people even post that? Like an extreme like white supremacist backlash to civil rights being expanded, you know.
And also, I don't place, because I'm not somebody who believes that marriage is necessary to put a society together. That is, again, a very conservative construction. There's also something to be said where, like, there were fewer divorce rates across the board. But if you were to ask women, were their rights more respected during that exact time period, regardless of race? They would not say that. I mean, this was pre-no-fault divorce in many instances. So that affected Black women as well. But Black families also perhaps had less freedom to I don't know, have a non-traditional family structure, because for the most part, they really had to stick together because they were getting lynched. Like, that's the reality of the situation here. But
and you had a lot of communities being torn apart because of migrations from the South,
right.
For instance, like that. Like, there are a lot of things going on besides white people gave up Jim Crow, and now all of a sudden Black men don't know how to behave.
Keep going.
Significantly higher before the Great Society. The period of time that coincides with that, obviously, is Jim Crow era. And then after the Great Society, the marriage rate in the Black community plummeted significantly. The Great Society is a part of that reason, not completely, but it's definitely a part of that. And what you're seeing right now in America is a reformation of Black families in America. That's a good thing, not only for the Black community and for Black families, but it's also a good thing for the country.
So what was the point of tying together the Black family and Jim Crow specifically? I mean, Jim Crow, as you know, was a period of racial segregation, of racial terror. Why would you make that connection?
All I was doing was referring to the time periods when you talk about the historical.
No, you weren't.
Pause it. Yeah, you could say the early 20th century then.
Right. Right.
Why would you call it Jim Crow?
Periods when you talk about the historical timelines in America and coinciding with Black families and what the marriage rate in Black families are. The overarching point is obviously talking about what polling shows today, that about 25% of the Black vote, depending on what poll you're looking at, is leaning towards supporting Republicans and supporting President Trump. The corollary to that is that when you're in a family unit, husband and wife, living together, working together, thriving together, you're raising your kids, your thought process is now talking about building generational wealth. What am I leaving to my children? What kind of communities do I want my children to come up in? What are the educational opportunities? What's going on with the economy? How does, and then
This is
to a
all
broader level, how does
structural.
foreign policy and all these other public policy issues flow into that? And so when you compare the terrible agenda of Joe Biden and what that's done to families in America, coinciding with the fact that you are seeing a reformation of Black families in America today, which is an absolutely wonderful thing and needs to continue. My view is it also coincides with a more conservative leaning and a more conservative mindset politically in those families.
One of the things.
All right. Well, I mean, again, the how many times did he say families in that instance? That is not a good marker or measure of how people are treated in society. I think the employment discrimination, the wage theft, the violence against Black people, all of that may be something that you want to put to the forefront instead of just like basically taking it as a given that a traditional family structure of a man and wife is what is going to lead to Black prosperity. And that's why this era of the Great Society, which now he says Great Society, not Jim Crow, that is what like threatened that. And, if you want to talk about what broke up Black families, it definitely wasn't civil rights. It was the fact that the neoliberal economic policies of what followed, and the drug war, for example, and the criminalization of poverty broke up Black families and Black men in particular were targeted by police and were separated from their families, which definitely undercuts the family structure as opposed to you're just not pulling her hard enough up by your bootstraps, buddy.
and I don't mean to belabor that. I don't want to get into it too much, but I just mean like, part of me also would submit too that like the idea of the family unit or structure as this like extremely benevolent unit and something that is like inherently good, like. Listen. This is not me saying that people can't have good or don't have good relationships with their families, or like that a family unit is bad. But like, there are a lot of oppressive elements of a nuclear family, and a lot of extenuating circumstances and variables that make it so that just like confining all social well-being or progress towards a family unit doesn't. People fall through the cracks of that when family units aren't the picket fence with a pie baking on the window. Like it doesn't work like that.
No.
I mean, it can correlate to like the good life or whatever, but the thing is like black capitalist apologists need to be told to shut up about generational wealth, because that is not the solution to any of this shit. You look at what happens in specifically the black community with regards to general familial wealth, it goes up and down because of things like housing policy, not because of like culture and being more conservative and trying to like save better and have better financial literacy. That is cope. That is selling your community. It's disgusting.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Quick word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be speaking to Alex Avina. Do you know some of those brilliant duos that help make us all made a leap forward, helped us all make a leap forward in society? The Wright brothers, Hall & Oates, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Some brilliant duos. What about the perfect duo when it comes to growing your business? Well, that is you and Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business, from the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Wherever and whatever you are selling, Shopify has got you covered. Now, we use Shopify for our merch store, and I can say, as somebody who is a customer, Shopify helps turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. They make it so easy to buy something that you may, impulsively want. That's happened to me on occasion.
EmMajority Report Thursday t-shirt.
Yeah, something like that. Shopify powers all 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. And Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds and Rothy's and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way, because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/majority. All right, folks, quick break, and we'll be talking about Mexico's elections over the weekend in just a second. are back, and we are joined now by Alex Avina, professor of history at Arizona State University, contributor to the wonderful Foreign Exchanges newsletter. And I heard you on the American Prestige podcast talking about this, so credit to them for having great guests and writers. Alex, thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
So a massive historic election over the weekend in Mexico. Mexico elected Claudia Sheinbaum, is it? Sheinbaum. Sorry. Sheinbaum. Okay, I got it right on the third try. Sheinbaum to be their next president in a landslide, and she's the first female president in North America, the first Jewish president, and importantly, she ran on a pretty left platform. What can you say about Sunday's results?
They exceeded all polling expectations. I think it's a blowout again, and it's even more of a blowout than Andrés Manuel López Obrador, also known as AMLO, his victory in 2018. So President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum won. I think right now the official result should come out this week, if not today. She won 60% of the vote. Her nearest competitor, Xochitl Gálvez, won like 28%. It's just a blowout, 32-point margin. Claudia Sheinbaum's political party coalition, Morena, and their two allied political parties won a supermajority in the lower house of Congress, and they got within 4 seats of a supermajority in the Senate. And I stress the supermajority part because that's what they're going to need to, if they try to enact some of the main components of President-elect Sheinbaum's campaign platform, like this 20-point program that has a lot of similarities with a program that AMLO has been banding about for about a year, I think.
Can you talk about that platform and that 100-point program? Because there's a lot of good stuff from my read of it, but I know that there are some obviously leftist critiques of AMLO and of the party Morena. But the platform in and of itself is pretty exciting from my standpoint.
I mean, I think it's a pretty standard platform of a reinvigoration of the welfare state, and it's trying to enshrine constitutionally and legislatively a lot of the goals of the 4T, the fourth transformation, as AMLO refers to the ascendancy of Morena to the presidency in 2018. Right, he refers to it as the fourth pivotal moment, transformative moment in Mexican history. The first being independence, the second being liberal ascendancy in the late 19th century, the third being the Mexican Revolution in 1910. So from the beginning, this moment and this movement was classified as a historically transformational movement. And to enshrine things like, and these are some of the things that unsettles not necessarily leftists perhaps in the US, but definitely kind of like the mainstream normie class, think tank class, like the direct election of judges, including judges to the Supreme Court. That's one of the platforms. There's an effort in there to get rid of some autonomous agencies. That's also troubling to many, the electoral agency, the transparency agency. But there's also things like trying to enshrine some of those social welfare programs that AMLO has instituted during his time in presidency, going back to 2018. So some of the labor legislation that was passed. I mean, if we think about why this was such an overwhelming blowout win for Sheinbaum and AMLO and Morena, a lot of it has to do with just they made a direct impact in the everyday lives of the vast majority of working class Mexicans with things like they increased a massive increase in the minimum wage. They got rid of subcontracting, so workers could finally be formalized and enter and obtain Social Security benefits. Some of these cash transfer programs that were implemented affect or impact like 7 to 8 out of every 10 Mexican families. So, if we think about the economic impact of the 6 years of AMLO in power, and this is why they won such an overwhelming victory. I think that's one of the main reasons. And now they're trying to enshrine some of those programs into the Constitution, and that forms part of the platform that, again, they're going to need to pick off in the Senate. They're going to need to pick off at least 4 or 5 members, probably from the PRI party, who are always willing to jump ship if they get what they need. They're not the most ideologically consistent of parties.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's they weren't able to get the supermajority, but there's like a pliable party that they'll be able to work with potentially.
Seems
on
like
this
it. They're going to have to start negotiating, right? And there's going to be a moment later on in the year, September, essentially, when the new Congress will come into power at the beginning of September, but President Sheinbaum will not assume office till the end of September. So AMLO will have like a month in power with the new Congress. So some of the predictions that I've read seem to indicate that, you know, they'll use that month to kind of push through a lot of these programs and a lot of these points that it included in the platform, and kind of clear the way for when President-elect Sheinbaum actually assumes office at the beginning of October.
So you mentioned how AMLO and Morena basically delivered for everyday Mexicans, and that they shored up their coalition through his 6-year term by doing so. Can you just elaborate on that? And how did AMLO's presidency shift potentially the demographics that of working class voters or people, or regular everyday voters, versus a more liberal class that potentially kind of more populated left of center coalitions in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that we've seen, if we compare kind of the voter demographic, or the supporter demographic of AMLO and Morena from the 2018 election to today, it's become a lot more working class. And I'm going off the work of sociologist Edwin Ackerman, who's at Syracuse, who made this point in a New Left sidecap, I can't remember what it's called, post last year, where there's been a shift of a class shift of the Mexicans that are fully behind this 4T, this Morena project that began in power in 2018 with AMLO. So from the demographics of it, it looks like it's become a lot more working class, and it's become, unsurprisingly, it's made up of the people who have benefited from strengthened labor reforms, from wage increases, from these cash transfer programs that have helped out elderly people in the countryside and in the cities. There's cash transfer programs that have helped out campesinos in the countryside. There's scholarships for students. There's questions over whether this model of like cash transfer is neoliberal or not. I mean, that's a debate within the Mexican left. But what's unquestionable is that it's improved the everyday lives of Mexicans, the vast majority of Mexicans. So what we've seen, I think, and it's also helped by what AMLO has become famous for, right? His polarizing speech that tends to divide the people who support him into the good people, el pueblo bueno, as he calls them, and the fifis, the rich, the wealthy. So through his discourse, right, every morning he gives like a 2 to 3 hour show. It's like supposed to be a press conference, but it's really a show. It's like I think it's the second most popular Spanish language show on YouTube, something like that. He controls the narrative, and he's been able to create that discursive cleavage right before, in terms of who is the good Mexican, the good loyal member of the nation, and who he refers to as kind of the traitors or the wealthy, or those that carry on the legacy of historical traitors in Mexican history. And when you combine that with some of those essentially welfare state programs, you see a consolidation of lower class support over Morena's project. And I think that's one of the things that really helps explain why it's just a blowout. I mean, it's more of a blowout than in 2018, which was already a blowout when AMLO won the presidency after several tries.
He was, kind of famously said that he is ended neoliberalism in Mexico, right? That was some of the speech that you're talking about there. Did he do that?
Aspirational. It's aspirational, right, not actual existing. Yeah.
It does seem like obviously he, reinvigorated and bolstered a lot of these social programs, and the proof is in the pudding in terms of wage increases. But what are some of those leftist critiques that you have been alluding to about, say, some of the cash transfers, or even the continuation of a very militarized police approach to to drug policy, for example?
Yeah, I think a main point of debate is whether this just represents, whether AMLO's 4T Morena program just represents kind of like a Mexican version of capitalism with a human face, right? And I think there's some truth to that. I mean, this is a welfare reformist program that, again, nonetheless, has a big impact in the everyday lives of most Mexicans. I think from the left critique is that there hasn't been more of a frontal assault on neoliberalism, even though I think there has been some substantial challenges to it, but not as direct or as frontal as some would like. And I know a lot of, there's a lot of ways to explain that, whether it's historically or sociologically, right? It doesn't help that that Mexico shares 2,000 miles of border with the global empire. They got to tread, carefully, much to my own chagrin, right? Like I focus a lot on issues of the border militarization and migration. And, one of the things that I've been disappointed with, and I hope that President-elect Sheinbaum can modify this, is how Mexico has essentially served as kind of like the colonial gendarme of U.S. migratory policies, right? That's one of the reasons why we've seen a drop-off at migrant, quote-unquote, encounters at the U.S.-Mexico border throughout much of this year, is because Mexico has policed them and attacked them and prevented them from getting to the U.S.-Mexico border. There's other critiques, right? The use of these mega projects that are supposed to be helping push for national development in southern Mexico, especially the most impoverished part of the country. So the infamous Maya train that's been built through the Yucatan Peninsula, there's been a lot of problems with it. The fact that the Mexican military is involved with constructing it, and the fact that the Mexican military is involved allowed AMLO to say, look, this is a national security priority, therefore I'm not going to provide any sort of transparency in terms of who's involved in the construction, who's making money off of this, ecological and environmental impact, et cetera. And now we have reports that there's been pretty serious ecological and environmental negative impact on the Yucatan Peninsula. The Yucatan Peninsula is famous for having a series of underground caverns and rivers and water holes that are amazing, and they're being greatly impacted by this train. And it seems like there's only going to be an expansion of these development mega projects. Sheinbaum talked about expanding this corridor of economic development from the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is where the state of Oaxaca is, and expanding it into Central America. So it's an idea of development that is really coming from the top down and not necessarily receiving a lot of input from communities on the ground in terms of how they would like to obtain socioeconomic development on their terms and what they seem to be is most beneficial.
Is it geared towards tourists? Is that part of the
Yes.
issue?
Part of the
Okay,
issue.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
told-
then that,
and then- yeah.
yeah.
So that's
Go ahead.
problematic for a lot of reasons. And then the corridor is developed around transportation of goods, circulation of commodities, et cetera. The idea, again, that it's going to create jobs, the expansion of infrastructure into these areas in southern Mexico will somehow be economically beneficial. But that remains to be seen. That's an open question. And certain readings of Mexican history would tend to argue against that. The other main issue is even though U.S. mainstream media tends to think they accepted the premise of AMLO's campaign rhetoric that he was going to approach the war on drugs in a different way, right? His famous abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets approach. I mean, that has remained largely as rhetoric, and he's continued a militarized approach to the issue of drug production and narco trafficking in Mexico. And that continues to fuel a homicide rate nationally that stands anywhere from 23 to 25 per 100,000. Since 2006, we have over 100,000 people disappeared, almost 500,000 people dead. So that's another critique, and that's my research. That's another point of critique that I would level and hope that the incoming president would shift. Right, I think there are certain parts of the country where the violence is intensive and more bloody and out of control, right? It's not a national phenomenon. So if you hear people saying Mexico is a failed state or Mexico is a narco state, that's completely insane. But there is violence that is localized in certain hotspots in certain areas. But sending the military into those areas in a shoot 'em up type of mode only intensifies and has exacerbated the violence. And we've seen that even before AMLO's presidency began in 2018. So I'm hoping that President Sheinbaum will rethink that and start to adopt a different policy to the issue of drugs.
Sheinbaum is a climate scientist in her background, which is exciting. But also it's interesting because right now there's a massive water shortage in Mexico City, and you also just mentioned that the development of that train and the impact that it has on the cenotes. Is that how
Yeah.
you?
Cenotes, yeah.
Okay. The limestone caves. I was just in Tulum on vacation earlier, so that's the only reason I know how to say that. But anyway, yeah. The environmental impact of that. Like, how does her approach or her background as a climate scientist affect those kind of two major issues right now?
We'll see. I mean, I hope that this is one area where her background and her training will mark like a departure from AMLO's presidency. AMLO is old school when it comes to oil, right? Like when it comes to older forms of energy and energy production that are having a disastrous impact on the environment and climate change. You know, Mexico right now has been in the middle of a 2-week-long horrific heat dome. Like there's been reports of like howler monkeys dropping dead right in southern Mexico because of the heat. Mexico City is scheduled to run out of water by some estimates by the end of June. And there's been a horrific drought that's been years-long horrific drought. So I think that's one immediate issue that she is well-trained and well-equipped to deal with, right? As a climate scientist, as someone who was part of a Nobel Prize-winning team because of the reporting on climate change. So for her, she's going to have to balance what the 4T and Morena referred to as energy sovereignty with these very immediate pressing issues in relation to the environment and climate change, right? So how one of AMLO's big mega projects was to build a oil refinery in his home state of Tabasco that by some accounts has not even produced 1 barrel of oil yet, refined oil yet. So, will she, I hope that she will move away from that type of older energy production models and to start looking at more, I guess, eco-friendly or green models, but she will do it within the framework that emphasizes national sovereignty or state sovereignty over the production of green energy. And that's going to be a big challenge, right? Capital today does not look kindly on the nationalization of key, minerals and sources. And AMLO did nationalize Mexico's lithium. But I think the challenge is going to be how to maintain what they refer to as energy sovereignty, but to do it within a way that looks to green technologies that is controlled by the state on the terms of the state to benefit the Mexican people and not to benefit transnational corporations. Right.
And so the relationship with the United States, what did you make of Biden's announcement about his, clearly in my view, illegal executive order of shutting down amnesty, and basically if crossings exceed 2,500 in a day, then he can shut down all, not amnesty, I should say, asylum seekers from coming into the country, which is illegal under domestic and international law. But putting that aside for just a second, the timing of it seemed particularly interesting to me because Shane Baum had just gotten elected, and obviously there's a relationship between Mexico and the United States that can be antagonistic, but for the most part, it seems like Mexican politicians have felt that they need to maintain that relationship for economic reasons and for just like empire reasons. What is her rhetoric on that front? Because I should also say she's a Jewish woman, and she's been photographed in the keffiyeh and has been critical of Israel. So there's some tensions there, I would imagine.
Yeah, and she mentioned this in her inauguration speech that she pledged to maintain friendly relations with the United States. And obviously, that's not a choice, right? Like that's not a choice when you share a border with the United States. Right. And there's that infamous quote that my fellow historians of Mexico are going to get mad at me with because it's so cliche at this point, but it's so, poor Mexico, so far from God, so close to the United States. Like that was attributed to Porfirio Diaz in the early 20th century. But that's the dynamic that kind of shapes U.S.-Mexico relations. It's an asymmetrical relationship of power. And AMLO demonstrated an ability to negotiate really pragmatically with both Trump and Biden, right? So he essentially traded certain forms of Mexican sovereignty in exchange for doing their dirty work when it comes to controlling migratory flows. And, Biden's order is obviously illegal. I think, and I saw that the ACLU is going to challenge it right away. You're exactly right that it violates both U.S. law and international law when it comes to asylum and refugee seekers. But, how do you maintain friendly relations in this context. What I see as the three main pressing issues for Mexico are can only be resolved in transnational ways with the collaboration of the United States. And that's security and the issue of drugs and violence, the environmental issues, and migratory flows. I mean, Mexico can do a lot on their own to address those issues, but they fundamentally, to be resolved, they have to involve the participation of the United States in a meaningful, respectful way that addresses the root structural causes of all three of these issues, right? So AMLO had a phone call with Biden right after Biden announced his so-called closing of the border. And according to what I've read and maybe the Mexican readout of the talk, AMLO did mention, sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela as root causes of some of the migratory flows and the need to get rid of those. And I think that's backed up by a lot of the research that folks have been doing and studying, the majority of people that have been coming through Mexico into the United States to seek asylum many have come from those two countries. So I don't know, Sheinbaum faces a really difficult challenge to maintain friendly relations with the U.S. at the same time, while trying to remain faithful and committed to some of the progressive or even leftist issues that they say are important to their political project. And for me, the two that are, again, going to really challenge those national commitments are the issues of security and drug trafficking and this issue of migration.
Lastly, going forward, I guess from the perspective of just like looking at this historically, the fact that she exceeded AMLO's basically massive win in terms of turnout and percentage, and people should know that in Mexico they have 1 6-year term and that's it.
Yes.
What are the overarching takeaways for what this represents in Mexican politics, given the fact that she was able to build off of his success electorally?
I mean, this is a incredibly important historical moment, I think, right? I think it does matter, and I think it will matter beyond just symbolism that it's Mexico's first president, woman president, and it's Mexico's first Jewish president. I think that's going to have a big impact. And when we look back on this historically, this is going to emerge as a key moment in Mexico's, what they refer to as Mexico's democratic transition, right? This moment that began in the year 2000, when the ruling party, the PRI, had been in power for 7-8 decades, and they allowed themselves to lose a presidential election, and the right wing, it took power. So now we're in year 24 of that what I would refer to more as a limited democratic transition. And this is going to represent potentially a watershed moment. Not just because of who she is and what she represents, which I think it is important within the longer flow of Mexican history, but she's also facing really urgent issues that she's going to have to deal with, right? So how she deals with these issues, it's going to determine how she's remembered historically as someone who was innovative and radical and was pushing, actual solutions to deep structural issues. Or is she just going to continue longstanding patterns of Mexican presidents who seem to be progressive rhetorically, but secretly and internally they're doing the bidding of the United States? Let's not forget that during the Cold War, 4 Mexican presidents were on the payroll of the CIA. There's actual evidence that demonstrates, right? So, and AMLO, talked a big game during his 2018 presidential campaign. He wrote a book going after Trump. And then once he assumed the presidency, he actually had a pretty chummy relationship with Trump, right? So, and again, there's all sorts of structural reasons why Mexican presidents have to play nice to get along with the United States. But, will she offer a different way forward? Will she offer different solutions to really pressing issues that are afflicting the country, not just the country, but also afflicting the world? And the final thing I'll say, it's Mexican opposition political figures and media figures in the last week have been losing their minds and really demonstrating publicly horrific, they basically demonstrated why they've lost 2 elections in overwhelming blowouts. So from the perspective of the political opposition, media opposition figures in Mexico, they need to do some really deep self-reflection to understand why they've gotten their butts kicked 2 elections in a row. And what I've seen so far in the last few days, they're failing miserably. And a lot of this debate kind of almost mirrors like the fascism debate in the U.S., except in Mexico, taking the form of the end of democracy debate. So I think that's also something to watch out for, to see like how will, they're saying, the opposition is saying there's too much democracy in Mexico. Well, why is there quote unquote too much democracy in Mexico? And what can the political opposition do to have any sort of political impact? Because right now they are down, and they are down big time.
Well, so appreciate your time. Alex Avina, you can read his contributions over at Foreign Exchanges, which is a Substack that I subscribe to, and I encourage other people to do so as well. And Professor of History at Arizona State University. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Emma. This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we will be with Dr. Dan Wilson, a.k.a. Debunk the Funk. We are back, and we are joined now by Dr. Dan Wilson, molecular biologist, host of the Debunk the Funk podcast and YouTube show. Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into YouTube and podcasting, because my understanding is that you started your show in 2020 amidst, obviously, a fever pitch of anti-vax misinformation.
Yeah, so I actually started my YouTube channel not thinking about the COVID pandemic at all. When I was much younger, I actually used to believe a lot of conspiracy theories. But then through my journey of becoming a scientist, I moved out of that rabbit hole. And now looking back, I think teaching about science from a perspective of this is what conspiracy theorists get wrong, and these are the actual reasons, and let's dive into it. I think I can kind of bring a unique perspective to that kind of angle of education. So towards the end of my graduate degree, I just said, I want to make a YouTube channel, and I did. And then COVID happened. So it kind of took off. But I originally wanted to just address anti-vaccine myths that have been around for decades. And kind of still doing that in the COVID era.
So what are those major myths? Like, what were the myths that preceded COVID about vaccines? And then there were obviously a host of insane things like myocarditis, like everyone needs to be taking hydroxychloroquine, like the natural immunity myth and all that. But before COVID, there were anti-vaxxers out there kind of bubbling beneath the surface. What was that discourse like at the time?
So it was pretty similar to what we see today, actually. A lot of the common claims about why people are afraid of or don't like COVID vaccines were also applied to childhood vaccines many, many years ago. So you mentioned myocarditis. That is a possible rare side effect of mRNA vaccines. And just like any vaccine, they have rare potential side effects. And so back, for decades with the childhood vaccine schedule, people were saying that these real rare side effects of vaccines were so dangerous and so bad that we should not be taking them. When in reality, they are very rare, and the benefit that vaccination grants us very greatly outweighs the risk posed by the disease that we're preventing. And that's true for COVID as well. Another common one, I think, that has really hurt public health messaging, that public health messaging I think has kind of struggled to grapple with, is the fact that vaccines, their purpose is not really understood. People think that you get a vaccine and you're never going to get infected. You're never going to test positive for a pathogen, and that'll be it. But really, the purpose of any vaccine is to prevent disease. And if you're dealing with a pathogen that has a really short incubation time and a high mutation rate, you can still get infected and get mild disease after a vaccine. And of course, even preventing severe illness is not 100%. But when people got vaccinated with COVID vaccines and then got infected with COVID, they thought that was a failure. And public health kind of made a misstep by calling those breakthrough infections, when in reality, COVID vaccines have always been doing their purpose, which is preventing severe disease.
No, it's okay. Because the other myth that was, I guess, repeated in conjunction with that or connected to that was that, okay, that was the purpose of previous vaccines, like the ones that people are used to, that they get for their kids or that they got as children. But mRNA is new and untested, and it's an entirely new technology. That's not the case. But if you could explain why that kind of mode of anti-vax thinking.
Right. So old vaccines still worked that way. For example, polio vaccines, they don't actually prevent infection. Polio is a virus that colonizes your gut, your intestines, and it causes disease when it migrates to your central nervous system and causes paralysis. And when we get a vaccine in America, it's an injected version, which is a dead virus. That goes into our muscle. And so the immunity doesn't necessarily translate too great to our gut, but our immunity is more than enough to prevent the virus from migrating into our central nervous system and causing paralysis. So those vaccines didn't prevent infection. You could still get infected with polio, you just would never know it because you didn't get paralyzed. And we see that today with, there were recent reports in the past few years of polio in the sewage systems of London and in New York City. There was even a case in Rockland, New York, of an unvaccinated individual getting infected with polio and getting paralyzed from it. And the polio is coming from people who have been vaccinated, but they're coming into contact with it, usually when people bring it in from outside the country, and they're shedding it into the environment. And that's why we need to continue vaccinating even though we don't see the disease, because the virus is still there.
Right. And I mean, we're seeing, I'm not sure what the status is of COVID infections. Obviously, it's a lot. Deaths are down, hospitalizations are down, but it's still present in the population. I mean, what are you seeing basically on that front, and in terms of people continuing to get boosted as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the virus is going to be with us for pretty much ever. There's no reason to believe that it's going to be going away anytime soon. So it's still circulating, it's still causing infections, and it is still causing deaths. But unlike 2020 and 2021, and even winter of 2022, where we were seeing lots and lots of deaths and hospitals being overwhelmed, now there's a pretty high rate of immunity in the population, thanks in part to vaccination and thanks to just infections, people recovering from infection. So those two things are going to make the severity of the disease in the general population go down because you have immune memory to the virus. Even the new variants circulating, you still have immune memory that can broadly apply to all of these variants. But the people dying from it, from what I understand, hearing from clinicians, including one clinician in particular, Dr. Daniel Griffin, he is saying that most of these people who are dying are people who are extra vulnerable to COVID. So immunocompromised or very elderly, lots of underlying conditions. And although the absolute number of these people dying is way, way lower, it's still happening. And so those people are the ones that might be advised by their doctors to get additional boosters, be aware of whether or not they're getting infected, to promptly get early treatment so that they can just reduce their chances as much as possible from of getting into the hospital or other severe outcomes. But vaccination has greatly reduced the risk or the burden that this pandemic has put on the population and the healthcare system.
And in terms of other anti-vax myths that we see, we also hear about the concept of vaccine injury, right? And how there are people who are recovering from vaccine injury as it relates to the mRNA COVID vaccines. What is that? And how much of that is actually verifiable in any real way?
Yeah, so I mean, no medication, no intervention is going to be 100% safe. So there are going to be some people who have adverse outcomes from vaccination. And the question always is the intervention, are the benefits that it's granting us outweighing the risks? And scientists have done exhaustive efforts to characterize these adverse events, these vaccine injuries. And every study from multiple countries using very huge populations and trying their best to account for confounding variables, they keep finding the answer that these events are really rare, and the benefits are still outweighing the risks, especially since the risks that COVID, the disease, poses to the individual, the severe outcomes that they bring are going to be much more likely than what's brought by the vaccine, myocarditis being one of them. Myocarditis can be a rare side effect of mRNA vaccination, but it's rare and often way less severe than what we see with infections. Infections can more commonly cause myocarditis, and the disease course can be often more severe. So those are the things we look at, but it's important to also acknowledge that, yeah, those vaccine injuries are real and rare, and those people do deserve compensation.
Right. And that's why we have systems in this country like VAERS, where people can report, and there's a court system that people can go through. But as you say, it's incredibly rare in those instances. What did you make of the promotion of alternative treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine as opposed to the vaccination? I don't know how you're really sticking it to big pharma by using tried and true pharmaceutical products from them, but for other purposes, right?
On a monthly basis.
Yes, prophylactically. How did those theories originate? Like, what was some of the misinformation that led people to these medicines? And why are they wrong?
I mean, so there's a lot to cover there, but yeah, it is bizarre that people who are anti-big pharma, anti-vaccine, all these things, like Joe Rogan, for example, will sit on his show and just trash vaccines all day. But then for a while, he was talking about how amazing monoclonal antibodies are and why isn't the government using that more? And it's like, Joe, those are like tens of thousands of dollars per dose, and the supply is limited. So not everybody can get those. And so it's just like total just absent-minded thinking on that part, just wanting to trash big pharma in one way, but then promoting it in another way. But then there were also treatments that were not effective, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, that got these huge boosts in popularity. And I think the reasoning for why those took off can vary case by case. In the case of hydroxychloroquine, it was highly politicized after Donald Trump said it works. That just caused a huge mess, and people ran with it. But scientists did their due diligence. They did what they are trained to do. They did what they do for a living. They ran randomized controlled trials because they thought, well, let's see if it does work. And it just doesn't work for COVID. And the same with ivermectin. In that case, it wasn't so much Trump, but it was a guy named Pierre Corey who has a medical degree, and he went in front of legislators and just gave a very impassioned speech about how ivermectin is a miracle cure. It obliterates COVID. And that was at a time when even observational trials, so weak, low-powered studies, weren't that great in number when it comes to ivermectin and COVID. And he was just saying that, and it went viral. And so I think that kind of sparked the blaze that was the ivermectin nonsense. But again, in that situation, scientists said, okay, let's see if it works. 2,000 Americans are dying a day, and doctors are desperate to find anything to help their patients. Let's see if it works. It just didn't. There were so many randomized controlled trials at this point that just show ivermectin just didn't work. But if a person with a degree comes and gives an impassioned speech in front of a credible audience and offers this easy solution to a very stressful event that is affecting all of our lives, then it can be something that people pick up quite easily.
Right. And who were some of the worst purveyors of that? I mean, you mentioned Joe Rogan, but I know that you've locked horns with Bret Weinstein and his brother Eric. Although I guess Eric walked it back after he said it must be safe because good old, wonderful, and moral Israel gave it to their citizenry, so they would never do such a thing like hurt people intentionally. Like, who were some of the worst, I guess, anti-vax influencers that you had to deal with, and what was it like covering that?
Yeah, so I mean, I have locked horns with Bret a little bit, just because he claimed on his podcast a bunch of things that were wrong, and then said there should be a lot of immunologists marching in to claim that to explain that I'm wrong, and I said, okay, let me do that. And so that's what I've been doing with him. And I don't think he likes that very much, but we'll see if he responds. But as far as the worst purveyors, I mean, in my opinion, one of the worst has to be Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been anti-vaccine for decades now. I mean, he's anti every vaccine. He thinks that MMR vaccines cause autism. He thinks that diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccines are killing children. He's anti-COVID vaccine, of course. And it's just, there's so much misinformation that he has peddled over the years, and he's done so much harm, actively spreading ideas and convincing people of things that are going to get them hurt, if not killed. And I think that's really, really awful. But just to add to that a little bit, I also like to mention that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not just an anti-vaxxer. He is also someone who thinks that HIV doesn't cause AIDS. He dedicates a few hundred pages of one of his books to that very idea, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's crazy.
Can you explain why that's ridiculous? Can you just explain why that's ridiculous?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. So, I mean, the idea that HIV doesn't cause AIDS was one that surfaced pretty early on in the AIDS pandemic. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. kind of takes this position that Fauci needed AIDS to be caused by a virus so that his agency could continue getting funding and whatnot. So he thinks AIDS is a real disease, but he doesn't think it's caused by a virus. He thinks it's caused by, these are RFK Jr.'s words, a gay lifestyle, which is a very problematic and just wrong view.
Women can contract HIV, by the way. It's harder, but women, cis women can contract HIV.
Yes, I mean, after gay men, women, heterosexual women are one of the higher risk groups when it comes to transmission via sexual intercourse. So yeah, he completely ignores that in all of his rantings on the topic. But we know that HIV causes AIDS. AIDS caused by HIV is specifically a disease where a particular kind of immune cell called a CD4 T cell is depleted. And that lowers your immune system. It makes you unable to fight off infections as easily as someone who doesn't have that. And we know that HIV is a virus that infects and kills specifically CD4 T cells. That's been demonstrated in the lab. It's been demonstrated in human-to-human transmission. We understand how the virus enters cells and kills cells. And we know how to block the virus from actually entering these cells and killing them. And when we do that, we see AIDS reverse. So if AIDS is not caused by the thing that you're preventing with a medication, then what's it caused by? So you could go on for a long time.
It's God just saying you like too much share. I mean, that's it's a dark joke, but like that, I mean, that really is extremely disheartening and depressing as someone who lost a family member to AIDS. Like the fact that we basically are back there with the discourse is anyway difficult. And like, what do you make of his popularity? Because he refuses to say that he's anti-vax or that this is an anti-vax campaign much in public. It's a lot of like, I'll say it and wink and nod at my supporters, but the campaign is, he says, I'm not anti-vax, right? Like that, why do you think that he doesn't lead with that, even though it's clearly the central kind of plank of his campaign?
I think he wants to come off as reasonable. I mean, he believes a lot of crazy things, but he knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for a while. He knows how to kind of be a politician, so to speak. And if he says something like, I'm anti-vaccine, that's easy for people to criticize. So instead, he says things like, I'm not anti-vaccine, I'm pro-safe vaccines, and just none of our vaccines happen to be safe. Well, Robert, how do we make sure that our vaccines are safe? We test them in randomized controlled trials. Well, Robert, we've done that. So what do you want us to do? Kill more kids by denying them a vaccine and giving them a placebo instead, when we've already done that and already seen the results? Like, but he can kind of obfuscate these things because the science is not always easily understood or accessible. So if he just says these things enough people will believe him. And I think that, just to reiterate the point that he knows what he's doing, him running now for president is no mistake. We're at a time where both presidential candidates from the two parties are not well liked, and we are coming out of a pandemic where a lot of people are having a lot of mistrust around public health and science. And so he's capitalizing on all of that and using it to prop himself up as a reasonable voice, a new voice, but really it's just for his own gains. And if he wants to say that he's not anti-vaccine and he's not running an anti-vaccine campaign, I mean, you just have to look at the people around him. I mean, Del Bigtree is one of his top partners in his campaign. I'm not sure exactly what his title is, but Del Bigtree is a massive anti-vaxxer who runs basically a show that's like Alex Jones's show, but it's mostly focused on vaccines. So, and he's been, caught in interviews saying that he tells parents to not vaccinate their kids, hopefully that they'll save them by not doing that. So he likes to deny it and pretend he's reasonable, but it's pretty clear what he believes.
We had someone write in, one of our viewers, Fred J. Walsh, said, aside from lower numbers of deaths and serious hospitalizations, can Dr. Wilson speak to long COVID? I continue to mask in public indoor spaces because I don't want to rack up infection after infection, even if the acute phase of the infection is mild and even asymptomatic, because it is my understanding that repeat infections, regardless of symptoms, are culminatively damaging to the immune system, cardiovascular, and other bodily systems. So any thoughts on that, Dr. Wilson?
Yeah, so I mean, long COVID is still an issue. A lot of people are still suffering from it. And what we know, we don't know a ton about long COVID and how to treat it, unfortunately. We are learning more every month about it, but as of now, as far as I know, there aren't great evidence-based treatments for it. So it is a concern. But what we do know is that vaccination and preventing severe cases of COVID are going to go a long way toward preventing long COVID. So if you have an asymptomatic or mild case of COVID, you're less likely to come down with long COVID. And vaccination, having that prior immunity, is going to help prevent you from having that severe case. So we can reduce the risk of it, but it unfortunately is still an issue. And doing things like masking and taking those precautions in public are certainly reasonable measures to take if you want to be safe.
Lastly, you touched on this in response to, or when we were talking about RFK, but about how he's capitalizing on this particular moment politically to push an anti-vax agenda, and an anti-science, anti-public health agenda. What do you think these past few years has done to us as a country collectively for our preparedness for a future pandemic? Because to me, the next one could be very scary given the damage that conservatives and people like RFK have done to public health.
Yeah, that's, it's hard to say exactly how much trust in public health and science has been affected. I know personally my feed on social media is just busted because I'm trying to keep tabs on all these conspiracy theories, and so that's what I get shown a lot. So if I look at my feeds, I'm like, oh my God, all these people are just mistrusting everything. But in everyday life, how many people do I know like that? Practically none. So I don't know what the numbers look like, but I don't think we are in a great spot for dealing with the next pandemic. I mean, we see now there are threats of bird flu, H5N1 or H5N2, circulating more in wildlife and in our livestock, which is concerning not just for us, but for also our food security. But with warnings of H5N1 possibly being in unpasteurized cow milk, there were an increase in raw milk cells. And how does that make sense? CDC says, hey, there's a potential risk for this avian bird flu to be in raw cow milk, so don't drink raw cow milk. And then people drink more of it. Like, what? Right. But with something like bird flu, we do have more prepared in terms of vaccines. We have a little bit more understanding on what we can do to prevent and treat it, because a bird flu pandemic is something that has been on the minds of pandemic preparedness experts for a while. But if it's something other than bird flu, how do we deal with it? There's a lot of complexity to this, and pathogens are really hard to predict. But overall, I want to say that I don't have faith that we'll deal with it better than we did COVID. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, really appreciate your time today. You can find the Debunk the Funk YouTube channel in our description, or you could just look it up. Dr. Dan Wilson, molecular biologist, host of Debunk the Funk. Thanks so much for your time today, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, guys. With that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun half where we will read your IMs, take some calls, do some clips, all that good stuff. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, Mike Preisner. We're talking about Tulsi Gabbard and what she's actually doing when she's in, say, the Horn of Africa. And Mike read Tulsi's new book. I did not, because it was not on my file sharing website, and I'm not going to pay for that.
Don't.
But we'll be talking about that for Patreon.com. Patron members, hey, become a patron of Left Reckoning. And I'll even put myself on camera to make that appeal.
Wow.
There, and because we like patrons over there. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, where you can get the post game where we talk about Bill Maher, who had, if you can believe it, some opinions about college students.
No.
And also Nelson Mandela and apartheid, which maybe we could even get to that in the post game here. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Support David and I.
Who was the guy? It was Jerry Seinfeld, who was saying that the traditional masculine man was Muhammad Ali, and it was like, don't look into his opinions on Palestine. I saw him in a keffiyeh photograph the other day.
Yeah, no. You said Mandela or Muhammad Ali?
No, he said Muhammad Ali was
right.
I was just thinking for some reason about that, but a picture of traditional masculinity as he was talking to Barry Weiss, and yeah.
Michael Richards will be on Jesse Waters' program tonight.
Oh, he will.
So Kramer is now going to have his say.
What's he doing?
Yeah,
It's when literally the promo goes, and he's going to talk about what the deal is with comedy these days.
Right. No, I was just thinking about how like these kind of reactionaries work backwards and like rewrite historical figures in their minds in order to justify.
It's wild to see like Bill Maher say, "Hey,
Right.
I know everyone loves Mandela." In 1999, Mandela, in front of Yasser Arafat in Gaza, said, "You take the peaceful route unless you get nowhere through that, and then you can turn to violence." He literally said that. That's just Mandela's words. YouTube, don't censor me. Don't censor me.
Mandela was on the U.S. terror watch list while Real Time was on air.
But like, and not because he like. Frankly, in The Long Walk to Freedom, he literally says escalating towards tactics including sabotage and terror is something we were prepared to do if we did not get any traction for our righteous movement. Now, that is a difficult thing to even talk about.
With liberals,
That's actually,
yeah.
or even in a moderated space. But you don't see any of the free speech warriors say you can't really talk about Long Walk to Freedom anymore because that they don't actually give a shit about that. They'd rather like Bret Weinstein or RFK be able to kill people with crappy medical advice. We have Brandon and Binder here. Let me get them.
While you bring them up, I'll just say you guys should check out ESPN. We did a pretty deep dive into the right-wing reaction to Caitlin Clark, as well as we previewed Celtics, Mavs, Panthers, Oilers. Celtics, Mavs starts tonight, so youtube.com/ESPN show for that. And there we go. We have our friends here, Matt Binder and Brandon Sutton. What's up, guys?
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? Nothing much.
I am fine, and nothing much is going on with Brandon, but maybe something's happening on the discourse.
Yes, we have a new episode for you guys out this weekend. And by this weekend, I mean the weekend coming after today. So I guess that's next weekend, but whatever. Where we talk about Biden's new asylum policy, Trump's various convictions, and the path forward for democracy. So really lofty things.
Yes, big ideas. Check that out, folks. Matt Binder, what's happening on your shows?
Sure. So it was a crossover Doomed and Scam Economy episode this week. The podcast will be up shortly at doomedcast.com and scameconomy.com. And also the live stream version is at youtube.com/Matt Binder. I dove into the recent charges against the Epic Times CFO. Who was, if you're wondering why the Epic Times has been so successful over the past few years and have raked in tens of millions of dollars more than they've ever made any year before that, they would have told you it was because an uptick in donations, but apparently it's because they were stealing funds from via fraudulent purposes, like stealing fraud, like unemployment money from people, and then money laundering it through various crypto firms and bank accounts, and then putting it in their accounts. So it was it's a very funny story. Check it out.
It doesn't seem super sustainable, I gotta say.
No.
Right.
But I've been waiting for someone to do a deep dive, so I'm going to check that out after the show, honestly, your episode.
Yeah.
What's great is like they would have caught this guy because you had like multiple banks and even multiple crypto exchanges reaching out and being like, "Hey, where's this money coming from? You're doing a lot of transactions and it's a lot of money." Yeah. And he was telling them donations. And then when a congressional office reached out to him to ask where Epic Times gets its funding from, he was like, we don't make anything from donations, really. So that was where it all sort of fell apart.
Contradictory, yeah.
Yeah.
Donations of some kind.
Right.
All right, well, check that out, folks. Doomed Scam Economy crossover. And Clay Donius writes in, as a Left Reckoning patron, I can't recommend it enough.
No, you can't.
So there you go. Look at that. All right, guys, we're going to head into the fun half, and we are going to debut. We don't have graphics for it yet, right? But
we have a still image for it.
The new EmMajority Report fun half song. Am I going to be able to hear this?
Well, unless Bradley wants to play it over.
No.
Okay.
People can look at it later.
Why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave the video of me, Brandon, and Emma, and we'll dance to the music for everybody.
Oh my God! No.
Because you're not going to be able to hear it either unless you.
You won't be able to hear it, but you guys can go back and listen to it. I think you'll enjoy it. It is pretty incredible. I have a hard time listening to myself for that long of a period of time. But all right, here we go. Heading into the fun half, where the number is 646-257-3920, and the new fun half song, go.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please. No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. What? Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like, I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing.
That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour,
deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the majority report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Ultraviolet.
Tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh, she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
And back.
We are back. And I'm turning off the voicemail now, 646-257-3920. Thank you to Ultraviolet for that incredible, incredible song. So well done. I love, like, our audience. They're so good at this kind of stuff. And I know someone was saying, there's a million IMs, so I keep losing them. But everyone's complimenting the song, and
I think one reason I think I can guess.
Drew Nathan says, I'm working on some visuals for this amazing song, but in touch with Ultraviolet, who's so patient and trusting with me to do this in my spare time. Well, thank you so much to you both, Drew Nathan and Ultraviolet. It's so good. So I can't wait to see the visuals. But
I mean, really great.
You should get my good side for the song. I want to make sure
Right.
Great incorporation of Michael in there.
At the end, right.
Which, yeah.
It was really nice. So many compliments here. For the song, the quarter Armenian says Emma's intro goes way too hard. I feel like it's a professional wrestling introduction. Emma's going into Hell in a Cell. A majority enthusiast, damn, that intro goes hard AF. Is it on Spotify yet? Brazon Day, best Jersey clubby I've heard this year. Kowalski from Nebraska, that intro is fire. Cinematology, new Emma intro is fire. Dizzle McFizzle, fire track. I mean, people are going. Matt's other burner account is Tim saying twerk. 7th Kansas, thank you so much for the wonderful interview talking about COVID and future pandemics. It's still so relevant as COVID wastewater rises again and anti-mask laws are propping up everywhere. Yes.
Yeah, the beat in that song, we were talking about this before, but it reminds me of how like Metro Boomin on the new Future album has like beats that are sort of inspired by PS2 horror like games.
Yeah.
And like Kendrick Lamar has a song called Silent Hill. That's such a great soundscape to use like chanting and stuff. I know it's, obviously not new, but kind of new.
Rob from Dedham, Celtics in 6. Derek White MVP, greatest NBA franchise of all time, gets their 18th championship.
Derek White's going to need to average 35 with
what are you
Tatum
talking about?
and Brown getting like 18 a game if he's going to win that MVP.
Hope in Work and Joy and Leisure says, my parents love RFK Jr. and they shared a post on Facebook from a pollster Zogby who had RFK Jr. beating Trump and Biden head to head. They have fallen all in. It's kind of sad. I'm really sorry about that.
That's awesome. I didn't know that RFK Jr. was leading the pack now. Brain momentum. It's interesting. After that comes out, all of a sudden he straight to the top of the polls.
7th Kansas says, I'm a part of a mask block and I'm so concerned about NCHB2